In the interest of keeping this conference on time, we're going to start. My name is David Kasich. I'm with the MedTech Strategist. We're a publication that covers the medical device industry in all aspects. And we're going to talk about venture capital and venture investing in the MedTech space today. We have a very interesting selection of investors here. But I want to begin with JJ. Who's going to talk to us a little bit about what Johnson & Johnson is doing in its JLabs and Center for Device Innovation in Houston toward the end of, or where, describe what you're doing, but also then tell us where you see yourself fitting in the MedTech startup ecosystem today.
Yeah, thanks, David. Nice to meet everyone today. So just by way of background real quick, my formal training is as a physician and have helped to start 3 companies, one of which is MedDevice, one sort of on the fringe of biotech and device, and one small molecule. So I think I've dealt with a lot of the spectrum of what we're trying to discuss here. My role at JLabs has morphed into what David's talking about, the Center for Device Innovation at TMC. And at JLabs, we help companies accelerate in sort of a no strings attached model, meaning you create your own value, we help partner, and we will actually put deals in place through Johnson & Johnson based on sort of how we see milestones being reached and whether or not it's strategic or adjacent to our fields. The Center for Device Innovation is actually a partnership between Johnson & Johnson Innovation and the medical devices companies to take our medical device interests much earlier stage and partner both external and also on some internal assets. So we've taken the continuum of everything from proof of concept through pivotal clinical trial, and we partner with the Texas Medical Center because you can walk across the street to get every single one of those done. So we're approaching this in a very cost-effective nature, but also on timelines that we can rapidly speed up, and we're putting teams in place that have done this 15 times before.
So do you have any formal relationship with Johnson & Johnson Development Corporation? Or phrased differently, what do you perceive to be the relationship between what you're trying to do at the center and the kinds of investment decisions that Johnson & Johnson as an organization makes?
Yeah, so there was an edict, I would say, at Johnson & Johnson across the board to move everything, not everything, 50% of all of our expansion external and earlier stage, 5 or 6 years ago. Now that's somewhere we want to get to, certainly we're not there yet. So JJDC is, fortunately an autonomous vessel that invests across all of our sectors, but we're very highly aligned with them to partner and invest on our projects. Maybe to frame the way that the Center for Device Innovation works is we actually will take assets or small teams or parts of portfolios from internal J&J houses where they're too early to actually be developed by our own strategies and teams, or we'll partner with external ideas and teams, and we bring them all into this center, and with the concept being that we've actually put some milestones around them that would trigger a payment at the end, whether it's licensing, some type of structural deal, an acquisition outright. But we're essentially moving our deleveraging and risking to an outside entity that's still owned by Johnson & Johnson and operated in partnership with JJDC, business development, and all of our financing core.
But are these projects really, or aren't they too early to really lead meaningfully to an acquisition? Isn't the natural kind of thing about, I know it's very, very new, but do you have any projections, estimates for what percentage of the companies that come into, maybe we should ask how do companies come into the center, but what percentage will lead to either an investment or a closer relationship with Johnson & Johnson?
So all of them have an investment by nature of them coming into it. So it's a strings attached model in the sense that we're either investing equity or operationalizing them.
Kind of stuff.
With, if you reach a milestone at the end of it, based on what that milestone is, typically a 2 to 3 year horizon. And that could be readiness for a clinical trial, it could be preclinical proof of concept, it could be ready for manufacturing. I think it's a project by project basis. So.
And how do you go about the selection process? I mean, is this an application process? Are you for the external stuff? Are you scouting for it?
Yeah. So right now there's a quickfire challenge that was launched. So we've had an enormous amount of applicants, which will actually be given free space and funding through Angel MD and Johnson & Johnson. And then after that's going to be a traditional application process. So you'll bring an asset to our attention, and we'll actually have a cross-sector review within Johnson & Johnson, and we'll engage in discussions about how we negotiate sort of milestone-based payments or strings attached.
And Johnson & Johnson has facilities and operations all over the world. If you join the CDI, are you committing to living in Houston for a period of time? There's Billy Cohen in the back. Billy, you want to raise your hand back there?
Yeah, so Billy's the brainchild for CDI, and obviously a huge part of why it's there in the Texas Medical Center. So your question was about whether or not you need to co-locate to
Yes.
CDI or Houston. So yeah,
Or
the
locate.
asset, the project, and potentially a small team would need to be in Houston, but Johnson & Johnson would actually core engineers and teams around these projects and assets. So we have a mix of just assets coming over to CDI, and we also have people and assets coming into CDI.
So maybe we can get into more about what CDI is doing as we go through the panel. Right now, for
Right.
introductory purposes, actually, usually I want to get you last because it's going to tee up my first question. So let me start with Omen at the very end. I would talk to us a little bit about MVM Life Science Partners. How big is the fund? How much of it is dedicated to medical devices? Any kind of distinguishing characteristics in terms of investing strategy or philosophy, and give us some representative portfolio companies. I know
Sure.
that's a lot, but you can probably do that in about 2 minutes.
Sure, no problem. So MVM, we've been around about 20 years. We invest exclusively in life sciences. We have an office in Boston, which is where I'm based, and an office in London. So one of the things that we actually think is a unique differentiator is that we look at global opportunities. We look at opportunities both in the US and in Europe. And given that our London colleagues have dealt with value-based healthcare for much longer than we have in the United States, we've always taken a value-based approach to our investing strategy. Our latest fund, fourth fund, $233 million. We've done about 8 deals out of the fund. Average check size is somewhere between 15 and 20 million into a deal over the life of the deal. We invest in devices and diagnostics quite heavily. I'd say over 50%.
Over 50%.
Over 50%.
What about your geographic mix in terms of your?
So
I know you've got Lombard.
yeah, so Lombard. So
Is
basically,
Lombard now based in the US?
well, yeah. Well, I'll tell you kind of the deals we just closed. So we just closed Vital Connect, California company. Closed Vertos, another California company. We closed Providence, another California company. And then we closed Valneva, which is a French publicly traded vaccines manufacturer. We did Biotheranostics, spin out of bioMérieux for breast cancer detection, diagnostic, again out of California. What else?
Vertos has been around for a long time. I mean,
Yeah.
I did an article on them, it must be
Yes.
5 years ago and 2 CEOs ago. And yet some of these are newer companies. Talk about how
Yeah.
the stage of your interest.
So it's interesting because a lot of companies that we've invested in, Vertos being a good example.
Lombard's all, when did you invest in Lombard?
Maybe like 7 years ago.
Okay, so you did that earlier.
That's kind of, but also Zipline is another
Right.
investment that we tracked for 3 years. So there are a lot of investments that we have tracked for many, many years. We like to be the last round of capital before a liquidity event, whether that's an IPO or a trade sale. And so what we've done is we have a whole pipeline of companies. Vertos is one of those. We got very close to investing many years ago. Saw some risk in reimbursement. Turned out that was the issue. NAS had lobbied against. So just basic overview of what Vertos is Vertos is a device that goes into the spine to reduce spinal stenosis. So if you have impinging of the spinal cord, you pluck out a piece of the ligamentum flavum that has basically hypertrophied or grown and narrowed the space in the spinal canal. And one of the key challenges was that the target for the device was really among pain interventionalists, and spine surgeons didn't like that. And so NAS, which is basically the main trade organization for spinal surgeons, lobbied against Vertos falling under a laminectomy code. And so basically the company had to go back, do a whole nother trial, submit for their own temporary code, basically got coverage under CED with CMS, and then kind of came back down.
And did you invest post that episode?
Yeah. So
what would make that appealing to you as opposed to saying this company's radioactive? I don't want to get near it.
Yeah. So I mean, we looked at it as the team had been there. The former CEO had left, but the head of sales had kind of stuck around for 5 years to get through this process, and so the team was actually very committed and dedicated to the company. In addition, we felt that getting that CED coverage with CMS was, basically the reimbursement risk had been taken off of the table. And, we called a few strategics who we thought would be interested. said, look, we love the company. If they had continued growing as they had been before their reimbursement got pulled, we would have actually acquired the company. Instead, we did the X, Y, and Z deal because of the timing. And so, one thing that we look at a lot is A, clinical evidence, and B, what is the pathway to reimbursement?
So one other question before we move on to the next, and then we can open it up to
Yeah.
obviously other questions. But Lombard has been around for a long time. You're an early investor in Lombard. They too had an up and down. Is Vertos more typical or is Lombard more typical of the kinds of investment you do? In terms of the state of the company at the time you're doing this, do you look for distressed properties?
Yeah, so if you look at Fund 3 versus Fund 4, so Fund 3 we got in, Funds 1 through 3 we got in a lot earlier. In Fund 4 we've actually kind of jumped the other way, where we like to now be more commercial growth capital. And on the therapeutic side, we will fund a phase 3 pivotal trial on really good clinical evidence and efficacy data out of phase 2. So we've actually kind of jumped to the opposite end of the spectrum.
Great, so we can explore these with other things. I want to get back to the profiling. So Lu Zhang, talk to us a little about New Gen Capital and again, size of fund, medtech percentage, and some representative companies and any distinguishing characteristics.
Okay, so we actually recently rebranded to Fusion Fund. So we're a California-based, Palo Alto-based micro VC firm. So we're much smaller, relatively new as well. So we have around 100 million under management right now, focused on the early stage emerging technology investment. So among all our investments so far, we have healthcare is one of our focus area, and medical device is around like 80% of all our healthcare-related investments so far. And because we focus on early stage, so lots of the companies, especially medical device company we invested, they're around A round, B round right now. Most of them are doing diagnostic, typical class 2 medical devices.
So your website talks about a connection with Asia. I wonder if you can elaborate on that. And are the companies you're investing in based in the U.S. or are they based in Asia?
We only invest in US-based company because the whole team based here, and also I was born and raised in China and came here for graduate school and then do my medical device company, sold it and start investing. So I have some personal experience like see the market here, see the technology here, and also see the potential huge market application use case in Asia and China. But because all my team are based here, I'm the only Chinese speaker, so we primarily focus on investing here. But meanwhile, especially for healthcare and medical devices, I will say the whole healthcare system here is very complicated. And also there are lots of, some large corporations, they play a very important role in the ecosystem. Which is good. Sometimes may also give some pressure to the new startup company to grow bigger, or even have a much bigger exit. That's also the reason we think we could leverage the connection and the resources we have in Asia to help them do the globalization. But it's not necessary that the company has to do it in the early stage. It's always better that we want to have the company establish themselves in the United States first. Meanwhile, here is a good market for them to get initial customer feedback, to refine tuning the project, and also get through the FDA approval, because which treated as a golden standard outside United States.
And what's the size of your typical investment?
Typical size, the first check is around $500,000 to $1 million, but for the A round, B round follow-on, it's around $2 to $3 million.
Okay, so one other comment, and maybe you have can elaborate on this. From your website, it seems like you're doing a lot of stuff in digital health, data, machine learning.
Yep.
How much of what you're doing is in that realm versus, say, more conventional medical devices, implantables, catheter-based technologies, those kinds of things?
Because you mentioned one word, conventional medical devices, but actually what we found is right now there's a new area of innovation for medical devices. No matter it's like machine learning, data analytics, or low cost sensor, they actually become part of the medical devices. We saw lots of the company we invested gradually, not only it's just a device, they connect themselves with the app, with the cloud, use the cloud to analyze the data, provide instant feedback to the patient and also the doctor, which actually creates some new use case. So
I would conceptually agree with you that the lines between digital and conventional medtech, but I guess my question is, if I'm sitting in the audience, I've got a company and it doesn't have a digital implication.
Yeah.
Are you interested, or
Yeah, we are.
Are you
we are.
okay?
We are. So for us, it's just we try to keep open-minded. As you mentioned, you saw we're covering different vertical of the market of different technology, but we saw actually there are lots of synergy. Even for like network technology, cybersecurity, there's a huge application into healthcare industry. And even when we talk about like IIoT, there's a huge application.
No question. But I guess my point is, if I've got a new treatment for sinusitis or a new treatment to
Yes, we do
heart
invest.
failure,
Yeah, we do.
you would do those. Okay.
We do that as well.
Well, that focus on digital tees us up nicely with Anuja. So I wonder if you could talk to us a little about Mithril. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yeah, for all the Lord of the Rings fans out there, you certainly know.
Oh, is that where that comes
Yeah,
from? Okay, I
Mithril.
never did make that connection.
Yeah.
So tell us a little about, because you have one of the most interesting websites. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing in the medical device space, because based on your website, you're in a lot of different spaces, a lot of
Yeah,
different
sure. Why not
areas.
intro us first? Basically, Fund was founded in 2012, run by two individuals, Jay Royan and Peter Thiel. $1.3 billion under management, and we're very
You've got
conviction-oriented.
$1.3 billion under management
management.
already, so you've invested
Yeah.
$1.3 billion in 5 years?
No, we have not invested $1.3
We
billion
haven't
in 5
invested,
years.
okay.
Yeah, no, we've got this.
You're just sitting on some of that money.
We've got a lot of dry
Ready to
powder,
talk to
yes.
these folks
There
out
we
here.
go.
So give us a sense of what you're investing in these days.
So we're pretty agnostic as far as, geography, industry, sector, and frankly even stage are concerned. We're very conviction-driven investors, so we cut very large checks, we hold very large positions in a concentrated pool of companies that we feel very strongly about.
With that
and-
much capital, do you like to be the sole investor, or?
Not at all, no. We're very non-formulaic, so
Mhm.
it's going to be kind of hard to put us down in an analytical model, certainly our investment ethos and philosophy. 50% of our portfolio is in what you would call maybe traditional spaces, traditional tech spaces, be they network-driven companies or big data analytics types companies. The other 50% are where bits meets atoms. So, and that's where I would think a number of our medical device and med tech related companies would fall under. I'll tell you what we don't necessarily do or not interested in. Things that, let's say, are app driven or, healthcare services, tracking apps. That's
And
not for us.
why do apps not interest you?
Well, I'll tell you what we are interested in,
Okay.
and so it's going to be much more compelling to see
Sure.
where we like to drive our dollars, and that's on going long technology. That's much more meaningful to us and companies that are able to go long tech. So what does that mean? We think particularly med tech and specifically medical devices are companies that are able to take advantage of technology, very similar to what Lou was talking about, in spaces that are not traditionally viewed as life science spaces. So whether it's applied materials or it's better sensors or it's better cybersec, things that are able to complement what the core ethos of that medical device company essentially does.
And are you seeing lots of opportunity in that space, or are you really doing kind of missionary work and trying to help those technologies come to the fore?
No, we're seeing a lot of activity in that space. We're not investing entirely in a lot of the things that we do see. I can certainly share some of the companies that we are invested in. So two
Okay.
areas of particular focus for us, probably medical robotics,
Okay.
and two devices that essentially are used to solve comprehensively come up with therapeutic comprehensive solutions.
Do you have
So-
an example of can you tell us what robotics company you're invested
Sure,
in?
yeah, of course. So I think a lot of people here know Dr. Fred Moll,
Sure,
who's
you're in Auris?
Intuitive Surgical. Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, so we're
excellent.
investors in Auris. On the therapeutic side, we have a company called Fractal.
Mhm. Oh, Fractal, sure.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. So I don't know if everybody in the audience is familiar with them, but I'm
Diabetes.
happy to talk about
Sure.
them. Yeah.
Give us a little bit, for those who don't know, Fractal diabetes, tell us.
Yeah, so, the way we thought about them was less so from a diabetes specific standpoint. We looked at metabolic diseases as a broader cost cohort,
Mm-hmm.
and we're looking at a number of different ways in which to address that cost cohort.
Mm-hmm.
And we came across the founder, Harith, of Fractal,
Sure.
who is just a little bit of background about him, a cardiologist by training, a research cardiologist, Brigham. And he, in his practice, the most serious cardiac cases that he had seen were those who had some sort of metabolic issue, major metabolic issues. So wanted to find a comprehensive solution beyond what was normally treated, traditionally treated by drug therapeutics, drug therapies platforms. So the way he went about doing that was he's come up with a very simple outpatient procedure under 40 minutes, where they basically ablate and resurface about 9 centimeters of the duodenum, enabling essentially the mucosa now to get back to its normal function. And in doing so, have seen A1C levels come down from 9% to about 7% in many cases. So
Great. So Fractals in Boston, Auris is in
Redwood.
Palo Alto, Redwood City, or wherever. Does that mean you're geographic agnostic?
Totally. Yeah, I mean, we've got
International?
companies in international, we've got companies in France, we've got companies in exotic places like Kansas City, so all over the map, Lebanon, New Hampshire, you name it, we've got them.
Where in New Hampshire?
Lebanon,
Lebanon.
yeah.
So, so on your website, you have an interesting comment. I want to open this up to everybody. You say that Mithril invests in, or what likes to build businesses in industries long overdue for change.
Right.
It always occurs to me that the medical device industry is about the most conventional. Everyone talks about wanting disruptive technologies, but this is really about engineered products that solve specific needs of physicians and surgeons going forward. How overdue is the medical device industry for change? And what do you think that change will look like? And then I'd like to open it up and have other people think about it too.
Well, just in keeping with our conversation about a specific portfolio companies in our roster, you know, when you look at medical robotics and surgical robotics today, it's really, there's one monopoly out there, and that's Intuitive. That's the Da Vinci system. So 30 years in the running. Of course, Auris is founded by the same individual who founded Intuitive, but we think that that's an aging monopoly, long overdue for change, an area longer overdue for change.
So not to put you on the spot, let me ask you another
Sure.
question, which is we're sitting next to someone from Johnson & Johnson.
Sure.
How are you viewing the Verily Ethicon collaboration, Verb Surgical, in the context of what you just said? Because it's a very different play for Verb than it is for Intuitive, although if someone from Intuitive were here, you'd probably disagree with that.
Yeah, well, you know, I think firstly, as investors, JJ and us, we're complementary. We have very similar views and very similar interests in the same kind of portfolio. I think I'm going to let JJ here actually answer that and see what their view is compared to how I've
Smart.
pretty much present how we thought through that.
Well,
space.
but JJ, answer the question as you think about the technologies you want to bring into CDI and push out. Are you looking for truly disruptive models and technologies? A lot of Johnson & Johnson's operating companies, Ethicon, best example, DePuy, you know, really make a significant portion of the business on technologies that have been around for decades, if not hundreds of years, or 100 years or something.
Yeah, so to the point of Verb and Auris, I would say, without saying too much, that we look through many different lenses of getting to one solution. So Verb is certainly not our only bet on that market. But we realize that all of our change internally is mostly iterative.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're casting that to the side completely. And I think, you know, I compliment Rezi on the sort of the differentiation of funds here, but typically you get way more growth late stage capital for medical devices than you do, you know, anything that's a little bit earlier or trying to change something in a dramatic fashion or seed stage. So I think that large strategics play into that because we want you to be commercial, we want you to have a foothold, we want to de-risk everything imaginable before we buy you. And so CDI is really a way of saying, okay, we need to change the way internally we think about innovation.
Right.
And it's also saying, well, we need to come to the table and change the business development around it as well. So
But does that create some kind of disconnect for you and the operating companies, which are the potential late-stage investors? Do they look at you as J&J science projects and, you know, come talk to us in 5 years?
I think 5 or 6 years ago they did, and now everybody's at the table together. The last thing I'll say about trying to change the landscape is we are pharma, consumer and med device, med tech, And so we look at the continuum of care now, and that's been a way that we've shifted our lens in the last 3 years. And so we're looking for devices or therapies or information that can help us, at the point of diagnosis all the way through continued access to care. And I think devices play a huge role in that, not just as tools.
I don't want to put you on the spot here, but when I look at your portfolio, it seems a lot more conventional medical device technology. As you listen to the conversation that we're having here, that Anuja teed up and that JJ just filled in, is that for MVM, or are you are you stepping in where everybody else is departing?
So I think there are there's a big funding gap right now between very early stage seed Series A companies and then the commercial stage guys, us, River Cities Capital, and others, right? So I think there is a major funding gap between the two. From our perspective, we focus a lot on clinical evidence, and that's one of our key diligence items on any company. So for example, we just closed a deal 2 weeks ago, a company called Vital Connect, wireless patient monitor, doing vital signs monitoring in the hospital and also outside the hospital. That's one of our first steps into this blend between traditional med tech, let's say, old stale telemetry, into the new digital age. And we thought that was a nice investment for us, where we have kind of one foot in either camp between totally disruptive, disposable patch versus, a technology that's been around for 50 plus years. And so, we are evolving our thinking, and I think as the team has changed and grown, we've evolved our thinking in terms of taking a little bit more of a risky opportunity.
And is the risky opportunity in terms of the kinds of technology that you're willing to back, or is the risky opportunity in terms of going earlier so that you capture more value, but you haven't hit all the milestones, you haven't proven, you haven't completely de-risked the opportunity?
Yeah, so I would say it's interesting because we have a lot of internal discussions about portfolio dynamics. We are a traditional venture fund, 10-year life cycle. With a standard LP base of institutional LPs. And so when we think about what is the fund that we were trying to create, well, if you look at Zipline, for Ambio, for example, was the first deal out of the fund. It was a revenue stage contract development business of generic peptides, and that has grown to be very late revenue stage. With significant partnership opportunities with big pharma. And then you look at Zipline Medical, when we invested, they basically had, let's call it 0 revenues, but they had just gotten 510K clearance. We'd gone through several iterations with them. We didn't like their initial product. They went back, they redesigned it, they came back to us, and we wrote the first check. So, as we thought about kind of building our portfolio and where we are now, where we're probably 80% committed, every company, as we looked at kind of the spectrum of opportunities that came to us and that we found, we saw a lot of good companies that had either run into some challenges or were poised for significant growth and had already gotten through some of those regulatory and clinical hurdles. They'd focused heavily on developing level 1 clinical evidence, and we made those investments, and we built basically a later stage portfolio. I think not really because of design, but I think because of just the way that our opportunities evolved. And so, as I think about kind of what the gap in the market is today, is I think you have a lot of, innovative thought leaders like Lou and Anuja, and JJ for that matter, that are looking at very disruptive technologies. And then you have a bunch of guys like us who are kind of on the other end of the spectrum where, a lot of these technologies have been de-risked. Corporations didn't transact because you have deals like BD Bard happening, or, Abbott and, Alere and St. Jude. And so, the big strategics aren't buying companies. And now you're finding a market dynamic where companies are stuck because, the Lou's of the world can't write a $20 million check, right? And the guys like us won't come in unless it's significantly de-risked. And so I do think that there is a market dynamic, especially in the med tech and diagnostic sectors, that there's a lack of capital kind of in that middle ground, and I think there's a unique opportunity for investors to either come a little bit earlier or to push a little bit later to carry their companies through.
I will say we do conferences as well. We have panels of biz dev guys, And when I asked them specifically, I mean, I think one of the phenomena we've seen in this space is the proliferation of multi-billion-dollar deals. I mean, when Boston Scientific bought Guidant for like $27 billion, it was more than the entire M&A value of the previous year. We've seen 4 $20 billion deals in the last 3 or 4 years alone, and now $1 billion. I mean, Novadac this morning was $700 million. That's a really nice return, but 10 years ago it would have made your hair stand on end, and now it doesn't. But business development guys tell me without hesitation that they're still interested in those sweet spot 150, $250 million deals. I guess the question is it realistic to count on those deals anymore?
Well, so I mean, before joining MVM, I was at Becton Dickinson, ran strategy and business development, and on the heels of CareFusion, I went to the board 15 times to push technologies through. We got one through in 2.5 years, and then the next deal was barred. So, part of the challenge is, even as a biz dev guy on the corporate side, it depends on who your leadership is, and what their strategy is, and is it disruptive, transformative, or what I do think will happen though is that let's call it not your top 5 med device companies, but I think I would say the second tier, third tier of device companies who went public 10 years ago when the markets were available. I think those are the companies, medical device companies, that will, the street will look to them for further growth. They've, kind of tapped out their platform business. I think those companies will start to step in to do those $50, $100, $200 million deals to actually accelerate growth with new and disruptive technologies. So, looking at the audience of entrepreneurs, I would suggest thinking differently. It's not just the J&Js and BDs and Abbotts of the world, but there are other companies.
But those guys are hard. Those guys are hard to find. I mean, in the old days, J&J and Medtronic and Boston Scientific would do 7 to 10 deals a year.
Right.
You're talking about companies like LivaNova that if they do one deal a year, that's.
Yeah, but even look at what LivaNova is doing,
like
right?
this.
I mean, they're investing actually much earlier in technology life cycles, and they're getting in, quite early. So I do think that there is an opportunity, and also with all the corporates starting their own venture arms like Baxter and others, there is another path to liquidity, which is getting to know these companies through their venture arm, which in some cases there's a Chinese wall, in some cases there isn't. But and they're really an extension of the business development arm. But getting to build those relationships so that when the timing is right, you could transact, and also really focus on building sustainable businesses with the capital that you bring on.
So I want to get to how you guys think about how you tee up opportunities. Before I do that, just because you raised the issue of exits, I want to turn this to Anuja for a second. In addition to these, kind of second tier, smaller med tech companies, there's also a whole other world out there of non-traditional medical device companies at all who might have an interest. How are you thinking about exits for the companies that you're bringing into your portfolio? Are you assuming, given the way you're thinking about it, that these will all be standalone companies, or are you looking at, to what degree are you looking at the tech giants as potential acquirers of the kinds of companies that you're investing in?
Well, usually what we see with all of our companies is obviously they go through multiple rounds of financing with, traditional sort of VCs, and depending on risk appetite, of course. And then organically, you will see strategic partners in the form of larger players, sometimes complementary players who will come in and want a piece of the action, who will partner alongside them via contracts for a period of time, and really, have a real relationship with them. At the culmination of which two things can happen. We don't think of these companies, we don't think about exactly what that exit is going to look like. Is it going to be a sale to a strategic, or is it going to be an IPO type structure at the outset? But they are designed effectively to function standalone and be able to take advantage of any innovation that happens in their space as well as in complementary spaces. So a lot of different people can be attracted to that along that path. And they are very well set to essentially choose either path, whether it's sale to strategic or to go IPO.
So are you suggesting that the path for the more digitally, more disruptive will look a lot like the traditional med tech model, or are you envisioning that there'll be a whole different way? And let me just tee that up. I just finished an article on a project that is a collaboration between one of the global med tech giants and one of the global tech giants. And one of the most interesting things to me is that if you ask the medtech giant how they think about the companies that are coming out of this project, they said, we want to acquire them. If you ask the tech giants, they say, we don't want to acquire them, we want to partner with them. So I am somewhat thinking, if you look at what Samsung has done, if you look at what Qualcomm has done, if you look at what Verily has done, I don't see a lot of M&A. I see a lot of partnering in the digital space, and I wonder whether that changes your investment model or whether you disagree that these guys will, and you see them as potential acquirers down the road.
Yeah, I think it's the level of the depth and breadth at which you operate inside these partnerships. How integral are you is a big part of, do they really see you as, a partner, a third-party partner forever, or someone who is an integral piece of the action and integral to their operations. And the more integral you are, the deeper you can go and the longer you can go with them, the higher the likelihood that you have both options available to you. If not, then a sale to strategic then becomes less and less likely.
So let me open this up to the floor. We've got about 10-15 minutes left to go. If anybody has any questions.
Can I just add one thing
sure.
before we move on? So I mean, I think the other piece of it is, I mean, you see what the private equity guys are doing as well. Like Apax and KKR doing Ajax Health, where they have billion-dollar funds, and they need to figure out how are they going to create value. And you see even from the far right, those guys coming in, actually trying to do roll-ups, and so that might be another path to liquidity, because I just, unless barring you have some sexy digital health, AI, I just don't see the public markets open to traditional devices. And maybe I'm wrong, but so we as a fund don't look at that as a path to IPO. It's either a trade sale to a big strategic or a small strategic, or now this emerging opportunity with private.
So let me just poll the audience. How many people here are from companies that are either raising capital now or envision that in the next 2 years they'll be raising capital? That's a fairly large number. Keep your hands up. Put your hands down if you are already at state, that the next round will be a Series C or later. So a fairly number of small companies are trying to raise capital. I guess the question that always comes up in these kinds of sessions is how do you get in? How do you get to the point where you tee up opportunities for your kind of organization? And let me just preface this with a comment by saying that typical VC firm that I talk to is going to look at 100 business plans and do anywhere from 1 to 3 deals a year. How do you guys decide if that model is appropriate? Which of those 1 to 3 make the cut? How do you decide? Because you're going to see 98 companies that look somewhat similar. What is it that drives the ultimate decision to make an investment versus the one that you say no to? I know, JJ, you're in a slightly different position because you don't do investments per se, but how does a small company that's raised a seed or raised a Series A, now they're looking at Series A, how do they differentiate themselves and win you guys over? Anybody want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, I think we're a little bit further down the food chain in terms of what would make sense for us to come in. We wouldn't do seed and then maybe just a Series A unless there's been a lot of traction. 3 key things that we look at. We look at caliber of team. Obviously, I've talked through 2 of our portfolio and their own backgrounds and their thinking behind it. 2, the tech. Talk a little bit about that as well. And 3 is choice of market. You can do a lot of different things with, in Fractal's case, metabolic disease. They've chosen a very specific market. In Oris's case, the same thing. They've chosen a very specific market to tackle. It's a very large market that they truly believe.
When did you come into Fractal? Was that early or late?
It was, by our standards, early. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's super important, and also the ability to partner with providers. So post Obamacare, knowing how to navigate to the market and which geographies you would like to enter and then grow over time, and putting enough thought into that, I think, is going to be telling. The other key thing is the relative ease and the elegance with which the device has been designed, or the platform has been designed. So you can have a lot of very complex research and thought put into coming up with a solution, but the solution itself should be extremely simple.
Mhm.
So we really look for that to the point where, you know, a non-life sciences person should be able to figure it out within a certain period of time, right? So a combination of all those things is kind of what drives a yes.
One thing I know that ours had a kind of an outlier, somewhat unusual financing strategy. There was a lot of money, a lot of PE firms. Was that a factor at all in your decision? Who else was coming into the investment?
Not at all.
I don't know. Okay. Anybody, Lou or Ahmed, do you have any thoughts about how you, when you're looking at the last 5 of which you're going to choose 2, what to your mind differentiates those 2 or distinguishes those 2?
Yeah, so to add one more point that Andrew just said, actually for us, we do care who's gonna come in together to co-invest with us,
Mhm.
because for early stage company, sometimes we do see, no matter as the type of capital or the background of capital, if they're not very familiar with the medical device industry or
Mhm.
don't understand the life cycle of the early stage startup, they might have some wrong instruction or wrong direction into the companies. So we do care like who is the other co-investor, especially if we're not the lead investor. It doesn't matter a lot who's the lead investor for this company in the earlier stage. When come to make the decision on the company, I agree with you that especially for early stage, like we only have less than 1% of selection rate. We have thousands of companies in our database already, but we only invest less than 40 companies so far. So yes, we saw lots of the company with similar ideas, similar solution, but actually the technical standard might be different. The team and also the years of experience, resources, how to run the company will be very different. Another thing we're always looking to is one is the business model, whether they have just a one-time sell business model or is a recurring revenue business model. Another very important thing, even for early stage, is we are always looking for some type of market validation. So we, as an investor, we have our own judgment on the team, on the technology, on the market size, but we prefer to have the feedback from the founder tell us the market validation. That's also the reason we actually have a couple of deals work together with JLab, because I think JLab did a great job that we co-invest with them, and later on through JLab, Johnson & Johnson kind of become the initial customer for the company, which is a very positive signal for the company and also for the investor.
Did that deal include an investment in the company that you're talking about?
Hmm?
Did it include an investment in the company? When you say you did a deal with JLab, did that include an investment?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's a company called Mission Bell. We recently closed Series A round, so both us and the JLab did the seed round. They're based in San Francisco, and they got the initial customer.
And that's independent of Johnson & Johnson Development Corporation, or do you have a separate funding mechanism, JJ, in your?
I think they have a separate fund, right?
We work through outside partners, JJDC. We don't have our own fund for JLab, so a lot of it's enterprise balance sheet, whether it's coming from JJDC or business development.
Mhm. So, and Ahmed, you can weigh in if you want. You moved around, but no one mentioned the one thing that as I talk to companies that are raising capital and talk to some of the venture capitalists, is often the most telling consideration or criterion, and that is personal relationships, right? As I talk to a lot of companies out there, usually you find some personal connection. I worked with this guy X number of years ago, or he came highly recommended by somebody I worked with, and I wonder how much personal relationships are, and more to the point, what happens if you don't have those? How do you get into those, to put yourself in the position? Because I would bet that there's probably somewhere, aside from the strength of the management team, a personal connection somewhere down the line in 75% of the venture investments that are out there.
Yeah, so I think, just to take a step back, when I think about the top 3 criteria, I think the experience and capability of the management team is number 1. One of the things that wasn't mentioned is also the clinical evidence. I mean, we focus a lot on the data. We're very data-driven investors because we believe that clinical data is your key to the promised land, whether it's reimbursement, whether it's adoption, whether it's the payers, not pulling back reimbursement, or patients being satisfied as they look. When it comes to personal relationships, I'd say maybe a quarter of our investments have come through personal relationships.
Really?
you know, a lot of it comes through, and granted, we're later stage, but a lot of it comes through bankers, conferences like this, other conferences, other partnering. I mean, one of the challenges is, you know, how do you, when, you know, like take Resi for example, when you get, you know, 150 meeting requests, how do you actually go through and pick who to meet with, who to not meet with? And, you know, for us being later stage investors, you know, I draw a line in the sand. It's, you know, if you're too early for me today, then I kind of draw the line there. And then I focus on those, and if there are opportunistic meetings and, you know, over coffee or something, people come up, you know, that's another way to meet people. Or kind of outside the madness of a conference, send an email, you know, and look to connect with a deck, and, you know, very short, very succinct. You know, we get hundreds of inbound requests a month.
And when do you do those inbound requests? I mean, are those,
You know,
follow upon them?
Yeah. So I mean, you know, if it's interesting, you know, usually if it's like a 3-liner email, this is who we are, this is what we're doing, this is what we're looking for. You send a deck, right? Because, you know, how can I from 3 lines actually tell? It's, you know, okay, if you pique my interest from that short deck, next phase is let me open the deck, let me look through it, and if it's interesting, then we'll follow up, right? And if it's not, well then, you know, try again in a month, and, you know, maybe it got buried in the inbox. So I think, but being very short, because I often get these like, I mean, literally essays on people's companies, and, you know, you know, I'm gonna look at your email for 30 seconds to a minute. If it's interesting, I'll take the next step. If it's not, I move on. So, and that's, you know, like given the volume of the deal, we look at probably 1,000 deals a year, and we do 2 to 4 investments. So it's, the hit ratio is pretty low, but it's a matter of just making it as easy as possible for the investor to digest the information, get your message, and then to take the next step.
And let me open this. So what do you like to see in that? Because again, I stand corrected on the personal relationship. I mean, I think that's interesting.
Can I
Sure.
add a comment about that? So I agree with you actually, and I think the relationships come in way more important, way earlier. Because they're really a sense of security and validation of, hey, if I'm putting seed or Series A money into this,
Right.
am I going to be diluted? Am I going to have to re-up? What's the timetable around your team? And so there's 2 ways to go about that. Hey, I know the team that's already done this and they're reliable. Or for instance, you know, at CDI, we're essentially putting our own teams around it.
Right.
And that's why we're more comfortable and maybe a little bit less relationship driven. But every other experience in my life has been almost purely relationship to get through the door, to then have the conversation around the science or the data. So I do agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, I just, you know, just in my anecdotal experience, it's much more about, and again, the strength of management team is always about this guy's strong management, because I've worked with these guys in the past, and I know them, and I trust them in what they do. But I mean, I think it's only encouraging to do it. But then what do you look for in that?
Well, it's a, you know, when you ask a question as an investor, you get a direct answer.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so I've been in so many meetings where we ask a question, and, you know, they try and skirt around, and instead of saying, you know what, I don't have it, let me go back and get it to you, they try and BS their way through the answer, and that just automatically turns us on. Because as an investor, you want to know the truth, right? As ugly as it might be, because we're in this together for a few years, maybe even a decade. So it's, you want to make sure that you can trust your partner and that they're going to shoot it straight. And if they don't know the answer, they're going to tell you, and they're going to go figure it out.
So, Anuja and Lou, let me turn it to you and pose the question this way. In the medical device space, which has been around for, you know, decades and decades, there are lots of people who've had experience and have done it. Is there the experiential base in digital health to date that allows you to take a look at the management team and say, these guys have done it before, we trust them, we know they've had good results? How can you assess the management team in a digital health space where so much of this is new and so much of it is really young researchers coming out with a very, very strong degree of experience in technology, but maybe not having the clinical experience?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's a newer field, and so we're used to investing in things that are pioneering in their space, and therefore there isn't a lot of modelable analytical data behind it. And this is across sectors. This isn't by any means just digital health or anything. So we understand that. So we're looking for other non-modelable data points to really get comfort around.
And are there other industries that you have an experience in or knowledge of that you can, you know, use in assessing your medtech investments?
Oh, sure. I think, look, in the end of the day, it's a combination of non-linear things that effectively form a yes or a no. One, preparedness is kind of key. Two, it's caliber of what the team has actually done in the past. It might not be a one-for-one. It's not, you know, like an Auris and Intuitive Surgical, and that's perfectly fine. And three, it's a clear view into how they're planning on executing. It's a combination of all those three that kind of drive a decision. I just want to quickly add to what Owen and JJ had touched on in terms of what we'd like to see when we get approached. We don't actually necessarily want a full-on deck on day one. We want most of our data on an email, so we understand, you know, who's driving the bus, what the key salient features of the company are, what the go-to-market strategy is, and any numbers. Quant is very helpful to us. Clinical data is great, but any financial data that they might have are all things we would like to take a look at and consider.
So unfortunately, we're right up against time. If there are no more questions, we're going to thank the panelists for coming and sharing their thoughts. We will leave for the table how you deal with the confidentiality issue in an email. But let's thank these guys and come back in 10 minutes for